All right. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the lab 2A and the 2A, 2A, 2B, and the lab 3, where we have the managed subscription at Outback, manage governance via Azure policy, and manage Azure resources by using Azure Resource Manager template. So today, let's see if we are able to cover the 3. If not, at least at the minimum, we are going to be able to cover the 2A and 2B. So for the 2A, so what are we going to be doing today? We're going to be looking at how to manage subscriptions and Outback. And I've actually explained that there is no way you can have resources within your tenant if you do not have subscription. So you need a subscription to be able to deploy resources. Now, for this subscription, we have different types of subscription depending on how you have obtained it. So you might want to leverage on the free subscription, which gives you $200 for 30 days. So, or you want to, so after then, if you want to continue using that particular subscription, you need to migrate to pay-as-you-go subscription. So like you already know, you only be debited, for what you've used. You're not gonna. So if you have like a virtual machine that you've created, and you are able to delete that virtual machine maybe a day after you've created it, you are not going to be charged for the full cost of that virtual machine for a month. You only be charged for what you've used. That means you only be charged for a day. Same thing goes with the other resources. So it's so important that you have subscription within your tenant if you are going to be deploying resources. However, if that particular tenant is just for authentication and authorization, it's just for you to be able to manage identity objects like users, groups, devices, and the likes, then you do not need a subscription. But as far as you need resources to be in there also, then you need a subscription, to be able to deploy those resources. Now, we've got an hierarchy, which I've explained during the class or in the class, where I explained that you have the management group. Then under the management group is where you have your subscription. Let me just quickly log into my tenant, and we're gonna see that. So just give me. So why this is. Okay, so like I said, we have the tenant, um, the management group. Then under the management group, we have subscription. You can have so many as there is no limit. I think it's 5,000 something the number of subscription you can have, but I'm not so sure about that. But I will check. So let's check the management group. So for every subscription that you take within your tenant, by default is going to be assigned to the root management group. Now you can start creating your own management group depending on how you want the hierarchy within your tenant to look like. So if you want to create like a management group just for dev subscription, for pre-prod, for prod subscription, then you can go ahead to do it. But every subscription you take automatically by default are going to be applied to the tenant root group. Now from the tenant root group, you can decide to create different management group. Then once you have those management group, then you can start moving your subscription to those management group. So but like I said, by default your subscription is going to be assigned to the tenant root group. Then you can decide to create other management group. Then under the subscription is where you have your resource group. Now there is no way you're going to be able to create a resource group also without that subscription, and there is no way you're going to be able to create your resource if you don't have a resource group. So your resource group is just logically separating your resources. All those resources are still within the same tenant. So regardless of how you want to do that, regardless of how you want to name your resource group, all depends on what the organization needs is or are. So let's go ahead. Now, In this lab, we are going to be talking about how to manage those subscriptions and RBAC. What is RBAC? RBAC is role-based access control. Now, for these, we've got a lot of. So I'm just going to go to one of the tenant root group. So we've got loads of permissions that you can assign to a user identity, not just a user identity, to an identity within your tenant to be able to perform some roles or to carry out some operations within your tenant. Now, for you to be able to do this, or for the identity to be able to proceed with that particular operation, then a role needs to be assigned. Within the role, we've got so many permissions. It all depends on what. So if I go on this access control, which is the IAM, this is where you're going to be able to assign those roles. Now, the roles are actually divided into two. We've got job function roles and we've got the privileged administrator roles. Under the privileged administrator roles, you are going to be finding roles like, so what's going on? Why am I okay? So you're going to be finding roles like owner role, contributor role. So these are privileged roles, meaning once you are assigned these, the identity is able to perform a lot of operations. It's given a lot of permission. So you want to limit how you assign privileged roles to identity, except if it's really needed. So being an owner within a subscription, within a management group, within a resource group, or even on the resource gives full permission on that particular resource, including you being able to assign a role to someone else on that same resource. So regardless of what stage this is, if it's on resource group, on the resource itself, on the subscription, or even within the management group, you are going to be able to assign roles, and you're also going to be able to manage those resources where you have been assigned the owner role. Same thing goes with the contributor role, but there are some differences, when it comes to owner and contributor. As a contributor also, you are able to do everything and someone that has been assigned an owner role can do. The only difference here is someone assigned a contributor role cannot assign a role to someone else on that particular resource. So there's some other differences also, but that's the one that is too feasible. But let me just tell you another one. Another one is if you have assigned a contributor role, you are not going to be able to create custom role. So for you to be able to have that full-fledged permission, you need to be assigned an owner role on that subscription. So there are other ones also, like the user access administrator. These only gives you permission to assign role to other users or other identity. It doesn't give you that permission to be able to manage those resources. And when we say manage those resources, as against you are able to assign role, meaning to manage those resources, you're able to do the right permission, the delete permission, the delete operation, the write operation, the read operation, and the like. But as a user access administrator, you are not able to do that. You are not able to create a new resource. Even if you have that particular user access administrator, you are only able to assign a role to other users. Even your own user account, you can do that. You can assign an owner role because you've got this. Another role that is more close to this is the role-based access control administrator. Same thing. So you can actually do that. Sorry, this one lets you assign, but this one just lets you manage, but it doesn't allow you to assign. Sorry. So that's the difference. So they're more related, but this one lets you manage access, and this one lets you manage access to those resources via Azure back and the likes. Yeah. So the other ones are just the job function rules. Now for the job function rules, like reader, like storage account contributor, virtual machine contributor, virtual machine reader, and the like. So those one are more specific to what you are trying to do. Let's say keyboard administrator, keyboard contributor. You see all those roles under the job function roles. So that's that. About some of those roles that we have, and those are the roles we're going to be looking at, as regards to this RBAC. So when we talk about the role-based access control, we're just looking at what are permissions that can be assigned on those subscriptions that you have within your tenant, those resources, those resource groups, or the management groups that you have in there. So in this lab, we are going to learn about role-based access control. You learn how to use permission and scope to control what action and identity can actually perform. So to make this very clear, what are permissions, what are scopes? What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these roles. I'm not going to use the privilege access. Let's check maybe the virtual machine contributor. Yeah, let's look at this. Then I'm just going to click on the view. I want to see the permissions that have been added to this virtual machine contributor. So what I need to do is just to click on the JSON file, So just hold on. I don't know what's going on with mine. So this before even this particular tab shows you all the action you can actually perform if you assign this particular role, and that's why you have the permissions. What can you do? What can you actually do? So, but to really understand, we can see this within the JSON. Now, this is how those roles have been configured. So they are, they're JSON files. Even when you are creating a new custom role, it's going to be a JSON file, and this explains, how what has been configured within those roles. Now, this ID here is what points to the this particular role. What's the ID for that particular role? So we call it role definition ID. So this is the role definition ID for the. If you search this anywhere online, it's going to point you back to this virtual machine contributor. So if you create a new role, you are supposed to assign a new ID, which is going to be different. Even when you have, let's say you want to create a custom role now, which is very close to the virtual machine contributor, but you want to remove some of the actions there. You do not want the user to perform some of these actions there. Then you can go ahead to remove some of the actions there. So this is the role name. And just explain, you can give it a different name. We're going to look at how to create a custom role, and you will see. Then the description, it's always nice to have a description, of what is actually, what the role is all about. And that's what we have here. It lets you manage virtual machine, but not access to them. So that means you can manage virtual machine, you can assign users to it, you can create a new disk, read, delete a new disk, delete it, create, but you're not able to log into them. So it lets you, manage those machines, but not, have access to them. So it all depends on, what you're looking at. Now, this assignable scope is what I was talking about, the scope. Meaning, where do you want to assign this particular role to? Is it on the subscription? Because when you create a role, when you create a new role, you need to determine where you want to assign that particular role to. Do you want to assign it on a subscription? That means if you assign it on that subscription, other subscriptions won't have that role. So if you want a role to cascade down to all the subscription within your tenants, then you need to assign it on a management group. Then when you assign it on the management group, then you'll be able to assign that role on all the subscription. Now, you can decide to say, no, I do not want these to be on the management group. I don't want this to be on the subscription itself. Rather, I want this to be assigned only on the resource group. So when you create a custom role or when you create a new role, you can assign it either on the resource group, the subscription, the management group, but you cannot assign a custom role directly to your resource. So we can decide where do we want these to be assigned on. Where do we want to use this, and that's where the assignable scopes comes in, and that's the scope. Yeah, what scope, at what level do you want to control that particular permission, and that's what you can see here. Now these are now the permissions. Within the permission, we have what we call the action, we have what we call the not action, we have what we call the data action, and we have what we call the non-data action. So I'm going to be explaining what this does. Now, in Azure, we've got two different planes. We've got the overview plane and we've got the data plane. Now, any role that you have here, it's actually on the resource itself. It's not anything related to the data within the resource. Now let's a very typical example. Maybe this will not do, but let me see. Okay, maybe this particular role will not be suitable, but for the storage account or the key vault, it will be. So let me look for storage account contributor. Yep, this should be suitable. So once we explain these, it will be easy for us to go to the lab. So okay, even this doesn't just going to look for. So let's look at things. So these ones are only related to the data. Okay, we'll look at those one after the other though. So let me just revert back to my network is a little bit straggling kind of. Let me just revert back to my virtual machine, please. Then we can surely look at another role that would suit whatever I'm trying to explain. So anywhere you see the action, it doesn't have anything to do with the data. Someone can come today and say, I have an owner role on the key vault, but I'm not able to access the secret within the key vault. Yes, you will not be able to if you have been assigned that owner on the key vault, because now key vault now has different roles. It all depends on how you want to manage. If you are still leveraging on the access policy, or you're leveraging on the RBAC for access to the data plane, so but we would understand all those things. So for now, everything you see here are action on those resources itself. What can you do? Authorization, compute availability. So when you see anything asterisk, meaning you can do all the actions, the write action, the read, the delete, and everything. So that's what this asterisk means. But if I want to separate them, let's say I want this user to only be able to read the location and not be able to write, not be able to create a new location and the likes, or I just want this user to be able to create a new machine, but I don't want this user to be able to delete that particular machine. Just what you can see here, then they will be separated. Then I can take out the delete permission or delete action, take out the write action, and the user is left with the read permission. Now what this does is the user is not able to delete, is not able to create. The user is only, or the identity is only able to read. So that's what we have here. So you can see what we have here doesn't have anything to do with the data within that particular resource. Now when it comes to the data, we'll be talking about the data action. But before we get to the data action, What do you have here? What is non-action? Now these are actions that we want the user to be able to perform. But I do not want the user to be able to create a new disk. What I would do is I can copy this guy and put it as a non-action. That means, yes, the user will be able to do everything, but it will not be able to delete a disk or write a disk. A typical example would be one of the privilege roles. Uh, um, I think the contributor will actually do justice to that. So I've said the contributor is just like the owner role that we have within, the tenant. Why? What's going on? Why? I'm so sorry. My network is been messing up. So, like I said, the owner role, the contributor role is just like the owner role. However, there are things you cannot do, like assign role, that particular role, to someone else. So let me just go back to the roles that we have, the privilege administrator role. So I'm just going to wait for this to load, um, so that we can see. So yeah, I'll pick the contributor role. Let's just hold on. So now this says it grants access to manage all resources, but does not allow you to assign a role in Outback. So you can see it gives you all access, but there is a but. So that but needs to be added somehow. So now this is it. The action is an asterisk, meaning you can perform anything. You can manage all resources within that particular scope. However, they are not actions. The not actions are what you should not be able to do. So when you have the not actions, these are things this particular user or identity that had been assigned this permission or this role will not be able to do. So under the not action is where we specify that. Now, I've said, you know, um, you are able to manage that particular resource, and this is based on the action and not action that has been, assigned on that particular role. What about the data action and not data action? Now, like I said, we've got some resources that have got the data plane, just like the storage account, the key vault, and the like. So for that particular one, I'm going to be using, let's use the storage account. I think that one is, but I'm going to now focus on, you know, the data part of it. So let's pick the data contributor. I'm going to do this now here, which is a good example. Now we've got actions that you can actually perform on the storage account. Any user or any identity that has been assigned this particular role will be able to perform this action. We'll be able to create a container within that particular storage account. We'll be able to read the containers created within the storage account. And when we talk about the containers, we're talking about the blobs. Within the blob is where you create your container, and you're storing your blobs in your files. You are also able to delete a container within that storage account. you know Also be able to generate user delegation key based on the permission that you can see here, or based on the action you can see here. You got not action, because the way we use the not action is just because I do not want this user to read. Let's say I take this off and I have to come and put it here. Yes, it will work, but I don't need it there, since it's not specified within the action. It is only when we have something like container and I have asterisk here. With that asterisk, the user will be able to perform everything. So I need to have a not action to knock some of this thing out, and that's when we use the not action. So if I don't put it here, then it's not going to work. As far as I do not have an asterisk to say you have the full permission, then I do not need to bother, adding anything to the not action. But once I have an asterisk anywhere and I want to knock out some permissions, then I need to leverage on the not action. So same thing goes with the data action. Now we are not talking about, now you can see this is related to the container. This is related to the upper level, the overview part. It's related to managing the resource itself, creating like a container and the like. But I'm talking about the files that are stored within the storage account. Now, you can have the permission to be able to manage the storage account and still not have permission to be able to manage the files within the storage account. And that's where the data action comes in. So for the data action, you can see we are talking about the blob itself now. We're talking about blob, and we are not just talking about container. So yeah, what are the data action you can perform? So within the blob, this particular user can delete, can read, can write, can move, and can even add, you know. So same thing goes, the same way we use the not action is the same way we use the not data action. So if I have an asterisk here, like let's say after the blob, I do not need all these guys anymore. Since it's an asterisk, it means the user will be able to perform everything. However, I do not want the user to be able to move a blob out, then I can actually put this guy in the not action. But let's say I do not have an asterisk here, I just decide to remove this guy. There's no need for me to add it to the not action, not data action. you know like I said, if it's not specified within the action plane or the not data action plane, you do not need to put it there. You only have to add it to the not action or the not data actions when there is an asterisk that says this user can perform everything, but you want to knock that off. So the assignment just tells you where this particular role has been assigned to. Currently I don't have any assignment, so that's fine. So if you have any question at any point in time, just let me know. So this is actually the scenario. We are going to be creating management group that includes all the subscriptions, um granting permission, to submit support request for all subscription in the management group. The permission should be only limited to create and manage virtual machines and create support requests, meaning these guys, they want us to create a custom role. Based on this now, they only need the user to be able to create and manage virtual machines and also be able to create support requests to Microsoft support team. So this is like the architecture, and these are the tasks within this particular lab. So we have implement management group. Like I've said, we've explained how you can actually create those management group and the like. So we'll look into it. How to review and assign built-in roles. All the roles I've just showed you are built-in roles. But let me see if I've got any custom roles. So you can see the type here. They are all built-in roles. But let's see. I think I've got one or two custom roles, but not assigned. Yeah. But I'm so sure they are not assigned on this particular management group. So we can actually look at that. So then create a custom rollback rule. Like I said, we just want to limit that particular user to those permissions, what you can actually do within the tenant. We do not want the user to be able to perform all operations within that particular tenant. So we want to limit it by creating a custom rollback rule. And the last thing is to monitor roles activities within the activity log. Now, one very good thing about Azure is the fact that we've got what we call the activity logs. It all depends on what type of activity logs you want to view or review. We've got the audit logs, anything that is being done within the tenants, you can actually see. We've got the sign-in logs also, that gives information about sign-ins, how identities are actually accessing the tenant or resources within the tenant. So you can actually see um, where the user signed in from, what's the IP, um, the location, uh, was the you know was the user leveraging on single factor authentication, or there are some conditional access policies that have been created within the tenant that is blocking the user from signing in. So you can actually see all these within the tenant. Let's see. So to do that, the same way we have it, where you can actually just go pull the activity logs within your tenants. You can also do this on each of these subscription on each of these resource. So if I want to do that, I need to just go to the monitoring part of it. So you can see, the audit logs. You can see the signing logs. You can even see the provisioning logs. So for the signing logs, like I said, when a user attempt to sign in, or when your user signs in, you want to see where the user is signing in from. You want to see what application the user is leveraging on while trying to sign in. You want to see the IP of the particular user, the location, what's the authentication requirement, if this is a single factor authentication or this is a multi-factor authentication. Yes, it make more sense if you want to set up your user accounts for this lab. But if you are not able to, if you are not able to access, I can actually give you or invite you to my tenant for you to be able to perform those labs. I've got at least I've got two different subscriptions there which you can use. Since I just renewed my MVP, so so sure the subscription is just renewed. So I've got this subscription which you can actually use. There, even when there is limit. Mm, I need to check. So even when there are limits, yeah, I think I can still. This can still be stretched, kind of. Yeah, this one is what I cannot really stretch. So I got this one as part of my MCT. So I got this one as part of my MVP. So you can still leverage on this. But if you have your own, fine. Because you do not want me to be approving your permission via PIM every time you want to perform anything. So but if you are not able to do that, I can actually give you access to my own tenant where you can actually test anything out also. All right, so that's fine. So now let's look at how to implement a management group. I'm so sure everyone knows how to implement it now, but I'm going to just divide my screen into two. Oh my, sometimes. Just give me a minute. I'm just trying to track. Sometimes I feel like this is not like the best way to do it. Finally. Oh, okay. So if you get access to my subscription, you know, I will need to just create a resource group for you, so that you don't kick me out of that subscription. If I assign you an owner role on my subscription, you can kick me out. I need to be careful. No, but that's fine. You can drop me your email address. Um, maybe once we're done, then I can just invite you. So this is what we're going to be looking at, and in this particular task, we are going to be implementing management group. So what do we need to do to actually implement a management group, to actually create a management group? Now, the management group, I've explained, maybe you want to separate your subscriptions. It all depends on what you want to do. So you just want to create a different hierarchy within your organization. So to do that, the tax one, we need to log into the portal.azure.com, which is the web app of it. Then the next thing is to search and select Microsoft Entra ID, because Microsoft Entra ID is one of the services I use the most. So it's going to be here as one of the favorites. The same thing, you can search here. This is my best way of, you know, searching for any resource service, within the Azure tenant. I just go in here and search virtual machine. Yeah, even when I know I can, pick them up from here, or go to create all resources. But for me, I just search in here. So if whatever you're looking for, the service, the resource, are not anywhere here, then you just want to search for it. Another way is for you to click on this icon here, go to create a resource, or look for that resource if you have actually added that resource as a favorite within your tenant, or within your dashboard. That's fine. But Microsoft Entra ID is by default here. So you can decide to remove it if you don't want it there. And you can decide to add multiple resources as favorite. I'm so sure the last time I showed you, you can create your dashboard also, and create this entire dashboard depending on what you want to see. But for me, I'm still using the default one. So what we need to do is click on the Microsoft Entra ID, which is going to show us the managed blade. It's going to tell me more about the tenant. It's going to show me what the tenant name, the tenant ID, the primary domain within the tenant, what license I currently have within the tenant. Currently, I'm not leveraging on most of those features, premium features, like privilege identity management, PIM, access review, entitlement, um, what else? Dynamic grouping, a lot of those other features, because this is just like a test tenant for me. So, and that's why I still have it as Microsoft, you know, Entra ID free. So if you are going to be leveraging on some of these features I just mentioned, or some other ones that requires you to have a premium license, then you might want to change the type of license you have here. So this is going to give you information about the number of users, groups, applications, devices that you have within the tenant. But that's not the case here. We're just looking at, how many, we want to look at the management group for now. So in the managed blade, which is the managed blade, you want me to click on properties. So I click on the properties. I'm going to tell you something about this. Now, for these properties, it's just going to tell you information about, where the tenant has been created. You can see the country, the name. The country cannot be changed. The data location cannot be changed, and that's why. But you can still change the, the notification language, the contact person, the URL, privacy URL, and the likes. Another thing, yeah, what I wanted to tell you here is, now this particular access management for Azure resource, it's what they want us to review. They want us to set it to yes. And why you need to set it to yes, or why you should set it to yes as a global admin, is in case someone created a resource, or created a subscription, or pick a subscription within your tenant, you know um and you want to see all those subscriptions even when you don't have permission on that subscription. Because the way Azure works, you will only see resources, you will only see subscriptions that you have permission, on. So if you do not have access to a particular resource or to a particular subscription, they will not show up. And that's why I can decide to invite you to my tenant and still do not assign a role to you or permission to you on those subscriptions I showed you the other time. And you are not going to, so what you're going to be seeing is, create a new subscription, and you're like, oh, but there are subscription in this tenant, why am I not seeing it? So because you have not been assigned a role on those subscriptions, and that's why you're not going to be seeing it. But as a global admin, and users can pick subscription within the tenant without knowing, except if you go ahead to block it. So if you want to block it, there is a PowerShell script that we use in blocking it, you know. But you want to be able to see that, so you need to check this to yes. And what this does is it gives you access to all the subscriptions and management group within the tenant. So how, I just explained that if you have not been assigned a role on that particular subscription, you will not have access to it. Now, I'm saying, let's say Gmail picks a subscription within the tenant. How am I going to know, since Gmail did not assign a role to me on that particular subscription? So what this is going to do, when I set this to yes, I'm going to have what we call an elevated access. Every subscription you create within the tenant, my user account is going to be assigned a user access administrator role on that subscription automatically. Now I can assign a role on that subscription. I can even assign an owner role to myself on that subscription and kick you out. So this is what this is going to have. It's going to give you an elevated access, and you're going to be able to see all the subscriptions within that tenant. So that's what we have here. So that's what we have here. So, and that's why in this particular lab, they want us to set this to yes, so that we are able to see all the management groups and the subscription within that tenant. So now that I've done that, by default, this is set to yes, then I'm good. Okay, before I move away from there, since we are on this particular blade now, let me just explain this. So you can see what we call the security default. It might not be part of this lab, but is worth knowing about. Now, when you create a new tenant and you start noticing after 14 days, or after the very first day, you started noticing MFA, you are being asked to, sign in using MFA, and you just feel like, how can I turn this off? I do not want MFA. Even when by September 2025, 1st of September, all users, all identities within the tenant that are going to be, performing any CRUD operation, like the create, update, read, and delete operations, needs to have MFA setup. But for now, you can still turn it off. So let's say you want to turn it off and you like, what's going on? I do not want this. So this is what is actually making that MFA appear, while you're trying to sign in. We call it security default. It's set by Microsoft. It's free if you do not have other options for multi-factor authentication. So let's say you are not leveraging on conditional access. Yeah, you might want to leverage on security default because it's free. You do not need, for conditional access, you need to have premium, at least premium P1, to be able to leverage on it. So this guy gives you access to, leverage multi-factor authentication even when you do not have any premium license within the tenant. So that's what this does. So if you want to turn it off, but that's not the best when you turn it off, unfortunately, I've turned it off within my tenant, but I'm just saying, but that's not the best practice. So, but because this is a test tenant though, so I'll go back to the management group. All I need to is search for the management group, but I've got it here also. It's one of those services I leverage on, and unfortunately, you would see that I've got these management group created already. I'm just going to delete, or let's just create as. It might not be, I think that was when I was making my YouTube video. That was when, I created the management group, and ever since then, I've not, taken it off. I'm so sorry, this is getting what's going on. I'll just wait for these to load. These are bloopers when I make videos, I won't let you guys wait this long. I will have taken it off, but unfortunately this is live, so there is no way I can take it off. But let's just hold on. Oh, this is taking more than right, so like I said, I know I've got this created already. I can decide to delete. Yes, let's just delete. I do not have any subscription within that particular management group, so I can still go ahead to delete. Let me just do this also for this guy. Yep. So let's see. Yeah, that's been deleted. I can go ahead to create. So for me to create, I need. So before you can actually do this, also you need to have permission within the tenant root group. You need to be able to do that, and that's why we had to go and set that elevated access to yes. Another place where that elevated access works is when you're trying to delete your tenant and it's telling you you do not have access to all the resources, or saying some resources are still within the tenant that you need to delete. I don't know if anyone has tried to delete, tenants here, and you're getting errors that there are resources within the tenant, and you are so sure that there are no resources, so you need to go and elevate your access to be able to do that. So just gonna copy this, create this guy, and I'm going to use the same name just like what we have within the instruction page. So paste this here, and it says the management group display name should also be the same. So I do that here. So this cannot be updated after you've created it. So I'm just gonna create. So I'm creating the management group now, and that's all we need to do on that particular task. So that is still being created. So we are not able to see the notification. So yeah, that's done. That's done. The group has been created. So I'm just going to refresh. That's going to. So I'm going to reload from here, and by now we should actually see the AZ104-MG1 that I just created. Yep, and that's it. So that's how we actually do that. So the next one is for us to now review and assign a built-in role. Now in this task, you will review the built-in role and assign a VM contributor role to a member of the help desk. So this is actually still using, the first what's this? The first lab that we created. So if you have deleted the lab, or you're not actually using your own tenant, you will not be able to see the helpdesk group that you've created. So you might want to redo it again. So most of those labs are actually connected. So select the management group, which I'm going to select now, and it wants me to go to the IAM and see the roles. Scroll down, view these. You would see the users, contributors, and readers. So the same thing I've done, I'm not going to be doing it again. So these guys want me to review the JSON, talk about the permissions, talk about the JSON, the assignment, which is what is there. If I click on any of those roles, so we are going to use the user role. Let's even see, you know, um, what the user role will look like. Since I said, the user is just like, we've got all the assets within the tenant. So let's click on this guy. This guy wants me to click on the view. So if I click on the view, so you've got the permissions. These are all the permissions. Any identity that has been assigned to this particular role will be able to perform. Then we have the JSON that shows you, what's actually being configured regarding the action, not action, data action, and the likes. Yep. And the assignment is where this particular role, has actually been assigned to, or identity that this has been assigned to. So, yep. So I'm not going to be showing that again. So you can see what the owner role looks like. That means if you are assigned an owner role, you've got all the actions, everything. You know, you can perform anything, you know, but it doesn't have any effect when it comes to data action for some of those resources. So if there is a resource that actually specify or separate um, the data actions from the resource plane, then you're going to be having issues, when it comes to um, what data action you can actually do or have access to, even when you've got total permissions on the resource level. So I'm not gonna be looking at that again. So I'm just gonna go back. So these guys want me to assign a virtual machine contributor, you know, um, to one of the help desks, which is a very good role. So virtual machine contributor is a job function role. Is a job function role. So I'm just gonna search for virtual machine contributor. So we can actually see it here. But for me to assign that particular role, what am I going to do? I need to come to the add role assignment here. Now click on role assignment. So here is going to list out who do you want to assign this to. Is it to user account? The role first. So I'll just pick virtual machine. So this is how we assign role. But it might not be the best way. I will tell you why later. When you start leveraging on privileged identity management, you want to assign a just-in-time role. So assigning a permanent role to a user is not the best way, to beef up security. So this selected role, now what identity do you want to assign this to? Now we've got different identities here. We have the user assigned identity, the user, the group, the service principal, or the managed identity. Can anyone tell me the difference between these identities that we have here? Anyone? Just give it a try. Can you guys hear me? I'm talking about the guys on Teams though. Yeah? Do you want to give it a try? Yeah, it's apart from the scope. So these are not this is not the scope. So the scope is what resource you are assigning, um what resource you are going to be assigning that identity on. That's the scope. But like I said, the identity management part is the most important part, when you actually uh when you're working as a cloud engineer, because you need to understand the identity. Without an identity, what are you going to be assigning on the resource? You will not be able to even use your resource. So you need an identity. Now, so I'm just going to explain. When you have a user account, we explain that user accounts are identity associated with data. So we have user account, user have got some data. You've got some properties in there. It represents you within that particular tenant. So your user account represents you within that tenant. Like I said, it's an identity associated with data. So we've got your name, your email address, some other things there. So it's an identity that acts on your own behalf. Now you go in there with that particular identity to manage resources, to manage other identities within the tenant, which is fine. But when it comes to group, now we have collection of identities, assigned within a particular group. And one of the reasons why we want to have groups, we know that the groups are just logical way to separate some things. But a very good way to use group here is, let's say you want to assign a particular role. you know um you have 32 people within a particular department, and all these guys need access to virtual machines. You want to assign virtual machine contributor, let's just take that role. Now that means for these 32 people, you need to assign those roles one after the other. It's not, you know, a good way to actually do that. You rather create a group, then assign that particular role to that group, and anyone that is added to that group will inherit that particular permission, that particular role. You know, it's a good way to, so, and that's what this is looking for. This wants us to, is asking if we want to assign this to a group, where, we have groups of identities, and once we assign this particular role to that particular group, all identities within that particular group will actually inherit that particular role. When we talk about service principle, I've told you service principles are still applications, app registrations that you've created within that particular tenant, but they are called service principle when they are used for authentication and authorization purposes. you know so when you use your app registration that you've created for authentication purposes, they are called service principles. And I'm so sure within the tenant, when you create your app registration or your application under the app registration blade, you are going to have a clone of that particular application created for you under what we call the enterprise application. Now, let me just take you guys there while I'm explaining this. So when you create an application, Jimo, anything? Okay, that's fine. So when you create an application, like I said, a clone is going to be created for you, a clone of that particular application. And I've seen people when they want to assign a role, like I said, this is asking if you want to assign a role to a service principal, meaning you want to be able to authenticate to your tenants or to perform some operation. Instead of using your own user account, you want to use an application to, to do that particular operation. Now, this is what I was talking about. If you go to the enter ID, I'm going to show you some things. You go to the ID and you go to the app registration blade here. Here, you are going to see all the app registrations I've actually created, or I do have within my tenant. A typical example will be this Azure B2C, app. So if I click on this guy, you will see when you will see this is the name of the application. This is the application ID. The clone of this particular application. So this is not a service principal. The service principal is within another blade, which I'm going to show you, is within the enterprise application blade. So when I create this particular application, a duplicate of this particular application is going to be created for me, and it's going to be stored under the enterprise application blade. However, that's going to have a different object ID. So meaning when I want to use that particular application for authentication purposes, I will not be assigning a role to this guy. If I do that, if I assign a role to this particular application using this particular object ID, then it's not going to work. I've seen these cases when you are assigning access policies to an application on Cohort several times, but I think Microsoft has actually corrected it now. So then we always advise them to use the object ID as against using the display name. So I'm going to copy this display name. Just look at this object ID. Well, it starts with DA and ends with 20, but the application ID starts with 777. Nothing is going to change. So I'm going to go back here, and like I said, I want to go and get the service principal. I want to use that for authentication purposes. So I go to the enterprise application blade here, and that's where the service principal lives. So I'm just going to search for this guy. So I'm looking for the 777. which is this guy. Like I said, the application ID is not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is the object ID. And that's what you need to take, so you can see this guy doesn't end with 20. It doesn't end with 20. Also, it starts with DD. Aside that, you use this for authentication purposes. We also use these, when we're actually working with a real life application and you want to use an app registration you created in Azure for securing that particular application for authentication purposes. We'll get there. We're going to be looking at that. I'm so sure we did one or two within the fundamental class, but we are going to be looking at that. So you are going to see, I think within this lab also, you are going to see how to secure, or yeah, or is it in security? One of these courses, I'm not so sure. So yeah, we are going to be using these to connect or to secure our real life application. So if I have created an application, a web application, let's say DevOps.ng, and I only want people that have assigned to that application to be able to log in, authenticate into that application, I can use this particular app, enterprise application, to secure it. You can see, you can assign users and go to that application, and only those users will be able to log in. And that's why in an organization, we've got our applications. If you don't have, the email address that ends with that organization domain, and you try to access this from, maybe from your Gmail account, you will not have access because you are not added to that application. So how do we add it? This is what we use in adding, but this is not for this purpose. I'm just talking about enterprise application, for service principle now. So like I said, when you create an app within your app registration blade, a duplicate of that particular application is going to be created for you, and that's what you're going to be seeing there. That's the service principle, and it's used for authentication purposes also. The last one is the managed identity. So when we talk about managed identity, yes, it's automated. So it's not, so by default, once you create an application under the app registration, the duplicate is going to be created for you automatically. You understand? Does that make sense? So there's something we call the workload identity. So these are not applications, and when we talk about the workload identity, we want to have an identity that is just separated from, or separate from, maybe our application, our what would like so but but the major thing is, these are features or identity that allows, application to securely access services within the tenant without needing to manage credentials. So, for user accounts, I will need to create a password, to be able to access or to be able to use that particular identity for authentication. The same thing goes with my service principle. When you create an app registration, for you to be able to use that particular app for authentication purposes, you need to create what we call secret. And this secret acts as a password, when you want to authenticate. And that's why you can see most of this application, you can see certificate and secret expired, because, I'm not using that particular application and the credentials are actually expired. So for authentication purposes now, I need to create like a new secret, and that acts as password. But I need an identity which I will not be managing its credentials. I do not want to create any secret password or something. So you can actually leverage on what we call the managed identity. And for the managed identity, we've got two. We've got the user assigned managed identity, and we've got the really I'm so sorry. So the user assign manage identity and the what's this name again? Uh, System assigned. Sorry, system assigned. Yeah. So for the system assigned, it comes with the resource itself. So what do I mean by it comes with a resource? Let me go to the one of these resources that I've got within my tenant, which is the virtual machine. Now, I want to be able to access the virtual machine within my tenant. I need an identity to authenticate into that machine. Virtual machine, all resources within the Azure environment has got their own identity, which is the system assigned identity. If I pick that identity from this guy, this lab, let me see if you guys can see well. Yeah, let me just this lab virtual machine, I've got its own system assigned identity. It's going to be different from this guy. It's going to be different from what these guys have and the other ones. That means if I want to use the system assigned, or if I want to leverage the system assigned identity, I need at least 6 different identities to be able to access all this, as against when you leverage on this user assigned identity, where you can create a user assigned manage identity and assign it to all these guys, so that you can use one identity to manage all these 6 virtual machines at once. So if I click on this machine, which I call labs, majorly, yeah, I use it for lab, and sometimes I don't use it for lab though, but I've called it lab. So let's hold on. So all resources, I've got this identity. So all you need to do is just go to the security part of it, the security blade, and you see this, the identity. So if you are using, or if you are leveraging this system assigned identity, that means that you are only going to be given access to this resource only. And that's why you can see here, a system assigned identity is restricted to one per resource, and is tied to the lifecycle of that resource, which is another difference between the system assigned identity and the user assigned. For the system assigned, once I delete this particular lab virtual machine, this identity is going to be deleted also. But this user assigned, it's something I'm going to be creating. Once I create that user assigned identity, I can assign this to any resource that I want, regardless of, there's no limit of the number of resource I can assign it to. And if I delete this virtual machine, it doesn't delete the user assigned identity. I still get to keep my user assigned identity, because it can still work for other resources. So it all depends on. So, and that's what, we have been asked here. What kind of identity do you want to give access to? Is it a user, groups, service principal, or a managed identity? In this case, we are looking at groups, which is helpdesk. So, let's see. So you select member, then you search for the helpdesk group. I hope I have not deleted it, but I'm so sure. So let's check. So it's just going to load all the identities. So you can even assign this particular role to an application. If I copy that particular application of let's just say this particular guy, you will see that I can assign the role to this particular guy. It will just look for that identity. You can see it will look for it, and his lab identity. I can also come here and search for that particular identity by clicking on the manage identity and searching for it. But for this particular lab, I'm only looking at assigning a role to this helpdesk group that I've created, which is this one. Assign a role, which is the virtual machine contributor, then review and assign the role. Okay, so no condition. So if you assign this role, or when you're trying to assign this role, that's what we call the A back. I don't know if you have seen it. So we have the outback and the A back. So the A back is where you can add conditions now. You can actually add a condition saying, oh, okay, this action type, I don't want this action type. I want this guy. But for this purpose, we are not going to be looking at that. We are just going to continue with what we have. So click on the review and assign. So we are going to be doing that twice. So it's just going to review what you have. Then I'm going to be clicking on adding role assignment. Like I said, you will not be able to add a role assignment if you do not have an owner role. And that's why I said, if I'm actually inviting you to my tenant, I'm just going to be, creating a new resource group for you. And I'm going to be, assigning an owner role to you on your resource group so you can do whatever you need to do on that resource group. So that's that. I've done that. So we continue with the access I am. To confirm that the help desk group has now been assigned a virtual machine contributor. So if I go in on the role assignment, you can see here virtual machine contributor, and we can see that we've actually assigned that particular group a virtual machine contributor. Another way to check, let's say you have lots of identities that you've assigned roles here, you can check access. So if you want to check your own access, this is it. View my access. I want to view my own access. If you want to check the access of a particular identity, you can actually look for it here. Let's say I'm trying to look for this particular app, which I know doesn't have, permission. So let's say all system assign identity, and these are all the identities that I've created, and I want to check the permission of this guy. And it's just going to say this guy doesn't have permission, 0 role assignment, 0 deny assignment. Oh, does this guy have any eligible? Because I do not have privileged identity management PIM set up, that's why I'm getting an error. And that's what this guy is telling me. Guy, you need P2 or Microsoft Entra governance license to be able to leverage on privileged identity management, which is the PIM. So that's that. So for the task 3 is where we are now going to be creating a custom outback role. This particular role we just assigned is a built-in role, and they've got different permissions. But now this particular task wants us to reduce or minimize the permissions that's going to be assigned on this particular or to this particular group. So to do that, it needs us to navigate back to the IAM access control, and from here you can add a custom role. Another way you can do this is, if you do not want to do it from there, you can, from here you can see create a custom role. So you can create a custom role from here also. So it all depends on what you want to do. We also create custom roles for identities also. So within the Microsoft Entra ID, you can also create a custom role. We've got different roles there: global administrator, application administrator, and DevOps administrator, lot of other roles which are not connected to resources, but they are related to you being able to manage identities within your tenant. So, and you want to just customize those roles. You do not want to give permission. You do not want to give app registration or application administrator permission. You want to reduce it. Maybe you do not want those users to be able to delete applications once they have created it. So you can customize those roles just the same way we customize outback roles that are used for managing resources within a tenant. So yeah, we are going to be creating a custom. I hope I have not created something as such, but so this is the name that I want to give to my custom role, and the description of that particular custom role. Now, this now gives you like a baseline permission. Do you want to start from scratch? Do you want to clone a particular role that is close, or do you have a JSON file you want to upload? So it all depends on what you're looking at. Now we are going to be cloning a role in this particular scenario. And when we clone a role, what role are we going to be cloning? We want to clone a support request contributor. But because we do not want to assign this particular role to someone or to an identity, because we feel like it's too much for what the person is doing, because the security benchmark is least privilege needs to be assigned to all identities within your tenant. So in a way to follow that particular least privilege um, um, advice, you need to, just minimize this by creating your own custom role. So now I'm going to be cloning a role. And what role am I going to be cloning? Which is the support request. So I'm just going to search for it. Support request contributor role. Now what this does is going to now list all the permissions that we currently have on that particular support request. So if I click on these, or you can click on next, so you can see what this guy can do. Microsoft authorization, everything but read only. Subscription, I'll see these. I don't. Okay, let's see. So this guy is only able to read resource groups. Is not able to create a new resource group. So if I assign this role to you, and you can see my subscription, but you cannot create a resource group, just know that you've not got the right permission. I've assigned, and this guy, you can see, is able to create or do anything related to support request. You can create all the CUDA operations. You can create, you can update, you can read, you can delete. So the next thing is, so in the resource assignable scope is, this is where we want to assign it to, which is my management group. You can actually add more assignable scopes from here, but even when you can actually edit this permission from here, if I click on a new add permission, it's going to list all those permissions I can actually add on this particular, to this particular resource. So depend on what you are trying to, manage. Is it the Azure Active Directory, which is the Enter ID, automation account, Microsoft apps like, the app service and the likes, automation, billing. But for me, I'd rather just do it from the JSON, you know. So from the JSON, you're going to see almost the same thing. You can see the assignable scope. You can see the custom, the role name that I've put in there. You can see the description. You can see the action. So I'd rather just start adding it from here instead of, adding it from the other side, which is fine. You can also download this if you want to do this, and upload it later, just like what this says, that if you want to start with JSON, excuse me. So here, so it says add permission. So I'm just going to, it wants me to exclude. That means it wants me to add a not action. And the reason for adding this not action is the Microsoft.support slash add asterisk, meaning everything related to this the user can actually do. So if I click on exclude permission, meaning I want to add a not action, I want that user to be able to perform everything within the support, but not what I want to add on not action. So I'm just going to do dot support, and you can see these are all the actions that the user can actually perform. But if I select any of these now, because I'm actually excluding, it's going to be added as not action. So here it wants me to click others register support request provider. So let's see. Now here, when you have your subscription we've got some things we call the resource providers. So for every resource, for every service that you are leveraging on within or on your resource or your subscription, sorry, you need to have that particular provider, just like a plugin. Um, you need to have it registered. So when you want to create a virtual machine, if you do not have that virtual machine resource provider registered on that particular subscription, you are not going to be able to create a virtual machine. A typical example, let me just take you to what I'm talking about to make it. So while this one is loading, so I'm going to pick this MVP subscription, and I'm going to go to resource providers. So under the resource provider, you're going to see what I'm talking about. The resource provider, without, is like I said, it's just like a plugin. Depending on the service you want to leverage and the resource you want to create, if that is not registered, then you are not going to be able, to perform those operations, even if you have got all the permissions needed. So while this is loading, let's just continue. I'll come back to that. So I'm going to add this guy, and you can see this has been added. Supports register action, and what's the permission type? Not action. So if I come back to the JSON file, you are going to see this under the not action. And like I said the other time, if you do not want a user to perform any operation, just don't include it within the action. However, once you have this asterisk that says you've given that full permission on that particular resource provider, then you need to have a non-action if you want to knock anything off. Oh my. So that's still loading. So I will take it back to the permission that we are. On the assignable scope, ensure your management group is listed, which is fine. This is our management group. We can also see it here, on the assignable scope. Then review the JSON file for the action, not action, assignable scope. So the JSON file is what we're going to be. So now this doesn't have anything to do with data action and not data action, because there's no data that we want to access, with this. So if there is a data action, like I want to add, this user needs to be able to upload files within a storage account, then I can add that particular data action. Or this user is able to add certificate to a key vault, I can add that, as data action, or I want to, exclude it as non-data action. But for this case, we are only looking at the resource, overhead only. We are only looking at the overview. We are only looking at how to manage that particular resource and not the data within that particular resource. So we are going to be leveraging on. Now, before we go ahead, you can see what I was talking about. So for me to be able to create anything, so a very typical example, the ones we are familiar with, is the virtual machine images. Oh no, the virtual machine, desktop virtualization, yep. Storage account, like it's going to be storage, Microsoft storage, yep. So without that, if I don't register this, I will not be able to use it. So registration required. Yes, if there is a way, like let's say I want to actually sync this particular storage, to the on-premises, or I want to move that storage to somewhere else, then I need to register this, or else it's not going to work. So that's what, the providers, are for. Then I'll click on create. We know what this is going to do already. And create this particular subscription. Yeah. So it only takes a few minutes to show up. So if I go on my roles now, I'm so sure it's not going to be showing up anytime now. But let's see, what did we create? We created a custom. So let's see. Now you can see it's showing up already. Now this is the name of the role we just created, the description of the role, then the type of the role we've created. So we've created a custom role, and this is the detail. Just the same way I was able to view the JSON for that particular, the ones we've created before. You can see what any identity I assigned this role can do. I can also view these on JSON, and this is what we've created. So you can limit what the user can do by creating a custom role that suits what the user really, the operations the user will be doing, instead of just assigning roles, saying, oh, okay, since this user need a support request contributor role, and this role seems like it looks more, it aligns with what the user is actually doing, even though there are some other permissions that are not needed, but let's just assign it. No, don't do that. So you rather create a custom role that suits the purpose of what you are trying to do, and that's it. So the last one is for us to go to the portal, go to the AZ management group that we've created, check the activity log. So I'm just going to go back to my management group. I'm going to go back to my management group and go to the activity log. Let's hold on. Just give me a minute. This is still loading. What's going on? Oh my. Why authentication, man? Okay, so let me go to the, now you can see the activity log here. So I click on the activity log, and this guy is just going to show you everything related to what I've been doing. Now we need to change some things there based on what we have here. So what we just want to do is the create. That's what we want to review. That create assignment, that create activity. So here under the operation, so I'm just going to add, so event severity. So I can add like operation, then select the kind of operation. I want to select the create role assignment operation, so you can search for it. So let me just create role assignment, and this is it. So it's just going to tell you, and this is what you're trying to review. So this is what you're trying to review, your create role assignment, who does the event, who did the event. Yeah, the event was initiated by my user account. This one, let me see. I deleted it already. Why is it still showing? Two minutes ago. Okay, so I'll check that. So that's it about how to manage subscriptions and Outback here we were able to talk about the subscription. We were able to talk about the management group, the outback model. What are some of the roles? How to customize your roles? How to assign roles? If anyone got any question? Okay, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to go through the 2B because of the time. I'll continue the class next week, but what we are going to do is I will need you guys to go through this one. If you have got any question or any issue why trying to do this, just let me know. We can still come back to the class to do it, but we've taken 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks off now for the labs, which is cool, which is what I promised. But we've still got a lot of things to do, and we're still on the course 2 out of 6, sorry, out of 5. So you can actually do the 2B. I mean, if you have got any issue, just let me know. And so I'm going to end the class, now, except if anyone has got anything to add or any question. But can you guys still hear me? Those guys on Teams, anyone? Are you sure? Are you still there? Oh, lovely, lovely, Abraham. All right. Thanks, everyone. Should in case you have any issue, or anything afterward, you can still message me on LinkedIn, and also for people that have joined the Slack community, also you can message me on Slack. If not, we'll talk next week.